Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. And I appreciate very much that Bitkom at this Hub conference picks up also societal issues and policy issues around the notion of digitalization and digitization. We at the German Ministry of Labor started around 3 years ago to look at how the world of work will look like in the coming years. And we looked, of course, at trends like digitalization, but we also looked at changing patterns of values of employees and workers and preferences, which are changing as well. And what we could see is that the diversity of different types of work, of jobs, probably will be increasing a lot in the coming years. There will be new forms of work, like platform-based work, as well as rather traditional ones, which are changing as well, and I will come to that later. So what we're facing is that we have a much more diverse world of work in the future on different aspects. Even, of course, other megatrends like globalization are changing due to digitalization, etc. We worked out in a dialogue with a lot of stakeholders, including businesses, trade unions, societal groups, citizens, how we want to work in the future and what are the needs we have on different levels, including the policy levels, to achieve this new world of work. And we put our results into a so-called white paper, the white paper Work 4.0. I cannot tell you all the results, it's more than 200 pages, but I will tweet the link to the white paper in the afternoon after my speech. So if you want to look up issues that I cannot touch upon now, please feel free to take a look at this later on. I will concentrate today starting with one issue that has been the most pressing one in most of the debates we have. And if you look at media today, again, with the results of a Boston consulting group estimation about job developments in the future, for a lot of people, the most pressing issue is the question, will there be enough work for all of us in the future, or will robots, algorithms, artificial intelligence take over all the jobs we are doing now so we can have a leisure time the whole day in the future? I think the bad news or the good news, depending on your viewpoint, is that we will also have something to do in the future. A lot of the estimations about job losses, I think, are a bit short-sighted. Especially the very well-known study of Michael Osborne and Carl Benedict Frey from Oxford University. I think they are not looking really in-depth into the developments. There are 3 reasons why I think that we will not be facing huge job losses in the future. And one is there are choices to be made, what we want to automate. Second, a lot of tasks will disappear, but that doesn't mean that jobs cannot change and other tasks will appear. And thirdly, there are areas where new jobs will be created. My favorite example is the example of a school bus. If you look at it in a Frey-Osborne way, you can look at the driver and say, automated driving will not be far away, so the school bus driver will lose his or her job. But when I think of the parents, and I'm a parent myself, and if you remember back how the situation was in your school bus when you went to school, I'm not sure if parents are really willing to set young kids into a bus with no adult. So maybe there will be no school bus driver in the future, but there might be a person taking care of the school children. So you can see their choices and tasks are changing. And of course, if you have automated public transport systems, you have people in the back offices organizing the processes, supervising, maintaining the whole things. And we have areas where, especially in Germany, due to demographics, but that is true for a lot of Western countries at least, you can see that in fields like social services, etc., new jobs will be created as well. Especially for Germany, I'm not so much afraid of massive technological unemployment, but rather of skills shortages we are facing. And the question is, how can we prevent these skills shortages to appear, and how can we make sure that people are not lost in the changing processes. And the changes will be huge. We try to make an own estimation of job developments until the year 2030 for Germany, and our findings have been that in the end there will be job losses in some sectors and there will be gains in other sectors, but more or less the outcome will be like it is today. But if you look into the numbers, it says that in certain sectors around 1 million jobs in Germany will be lost, and in other sectors around 1 million jobs will be created. And this is only changes from one sector to the other. Of course, jobs inside sectors will change, and even inside what we now call a certain job description. And we are talking about the year 2030, so we are talking about all workers that are in their mid-50s or younger. And that is why I think we have to tackle these issues of qualification very seriously. And I think when you look into the qualifications, we have to be careful not to come to very simple answers as well. One theory, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world, is that we will have a hollowing out of the middle, a disappearance of the middle skills, whereas the high-skilled jobs will stay and the low-skilled jobs will stay as well, because they are too cheap to be automated, and automation does not make sense economically. For countries like Germany, with a very strong middle skill model, with an apprenticeship model, which is working very much so to prepare workers also for changes in their working environment, I'm a bit more optimistic that we might keep the middle skills, at least if we are able to adapt our education system and especially our lifelong learning systems to the needs of the future. And there are some very good examples already where people, when they're doing their apprenticeships, no longer have a teacher or another worker who tells them how to do things. Last week I was at the opening ceremony of a learning lab in Hanover at the Volkswagen plant there, and there the new idea is that the apprentices, they get a small robot and they get the software, and then they're programming the robots themselves, and then they do a tutorial video about what they learned to teach it to other apprentices. And this makes it much more possible for this generation to adapt flexibly to the needs we are facing in the future. I'm a bit more worried about low-skilled workers actually in Germany, especially as low-skilled work in Germany or in Scandinavia, for example, is not as cheap as in other areas of the world. So I think automation risks are higher there. So there's also regional aspect if you look worldwide at the developments in the world of work. When we talk about the future skills, I also always estimate and think that we have to look what are really the needs for the future. And there again, very often we talk about IT skills. And yes, IT skills will be necessary for every worker. Also in fields like care work or education work, you will not do without IT skills. But at the same time, if you look at companies changing, where workers are no longer feeding a machine only, but supervising processes, organizing processes, skills like holistic thinking, skills like organizing processes, and yes, social skills will be needed much more in the future. I think you cannot automate empathy. Some human skills will stay and will play a stronger role in the future. So if that is true, that we need a much more fundamental approach on reskilling, how to do that, I think that we cannot find one single answer to that. I'm very skeptical anyhow whether one-size-fits-all solutions will work in the future. So we really have to look at the different levels. And when it comes to qualification, the company level stays a central one. But we have to make sure that we change our culture here. Because what we can see, at least in Germany very often, is that the high-skilled workers get a reskilling over their life course, whereas the middle and low-skilled do not get the qualifications over the life course. And if it's true that especially middle and low skills are endangered to lose their jobs, the companies also have to take a closer look at these groups of workers in the future. But then, of course, there will be some sectors where, for example, in Germany now a lot of jobs are created, but I know that these jobs will disappear in the future. If you look at logistics, for example, a lot of low-skilled jobs have been created there over the last years in Germany, due also to online merchandise, etc. But of course, this kind of jobs are at a very high risk of automation. So I think our social policy also has to change. We have a quite good, I would say, unemployment insurance in Germany. So if you are unemployed, you will get money to get along, you will get a qualification, and you get help to find a new job. But why do we always only start when somebody already has lost his or her jobs? Don't we have to change into a much more proactive approach when it comes to active labor market policies, which should not be only active, but proactive in the future? And that's what we started in Germany. As a first step, we are starting at the public employment services from next year on to give counseling to everybody who's interested. Do the skills I have secure a workplace for me in the future in 5 or 10 years? Or do I need some reskilling? So this counseling, because people don't know what the skills are that they need, very often even companies don't know what are the skills that they need, this counseling would be a first step. But I think we have to go even further and finance from the unemployment insurance qualification that are needed to prevent unemployment rather than just manage unemployment. This is a step I think that is necessary, and I think it's also sensible, because rather than paying out unemployment benefits, I think we should invest into the people and try to avoid unemployment. But also, of course, for the single person, the situation is changing. And everybody who now enters a working life knows that a change in job, a change in qualification, maybe even changing from being self-employed to being employed will be much more normal in a working life in the future. And the model starting at a company with 16 doing an apprenticeship and retiring at the same company with 67 is more or less likely to be the case. And then when we look at the different starting points people have when entering their working life, due to their material resources or the background of their parents, why shouldn't we try to give and get some more equality there to prevent people to inherit a low level on the labor market from their parents? So our idea is to introduce a personal opportunity account with a certain amount of money, around 20,000 euro, we think, which can be used for retraining or to start a business, so to make your working life better adaptable to future changes, and more agile when it comes to forms of work. That is the third element I always like to stress about the possibilities and needs we have. And really, even though I'm very optimistic that we won't have technological unemployment in the future, that we need changes in our policies. And that is, of course, true not only the question of qualifications. We have to take a look how we can work more flexible in the future when it comes to working time, working place. And even my rather conservative ministry now introduced a working time, working place frame where people can choose when they work in between the period of 6 in the morning till 10 in the evening, and can work up to 30% of their work, mobile work. And I think that has to happen in all companies to reconcile the flexibility needs companies have, but also that employees have. We also need to take into account if it's true that changes from being self-employed to being dependently employed are more likely to occur in the future, shouldn't we introduce schemes for universal access to pensions funds in the future? Because we can see, especially people who take the step into starting a business, very often end up at their working life with a very low pensions level, or are depending even on tax-financed basic pension system. I think we have to overcome this. In Germany, I don't want to go into the details there, we have some problems because the health insurance for self-employed is very expensive, and we have to tackle this if we want to make sure that people can invest also in their pension schemes in the future. And I think we have to develop a lot of policy instruments around this, taking into account that the world of work is changing a lot in the future. And as I know that the next panel here will be about the universal basic income, let me say 2 or 3 words there as well. As I said, I'm rather skeptical that one-size-fits-all solutions will solve the problems of the future. And so the UBI, I think, has some shortcomings. Why should you just pay people for not working when a job is in danger, rather than invest into people and qualification and skills? Will the universal basic income really allow everybody to be working in the future? If I think about people with handicaps, the 650 euro like in Finland or the 1,000 euro discussed in Germany will not be enough to get an exoskeleton, which makes it possible for you to stand again, or an assistant who helps you do your work. So I think there are a lot of questions around the universal basic income, why I'm rather skeptical about it. But the underlying questions, how do we adapt, and if necessary also in a radical way, our welfare system, our unemployment schemes in the future, I think that are the right questions, that are crucial questions, and that are pressing questions. So I think the debate around the universal basic income, even I don't like the instrument, or I don't think it's the solution for all our problems, I think it's an interesting one. So to sum up, we have to take serious the technology, but also other trends in our economies will be changing the way we work in the future. But at the same time, there is no technological determinism. We don't have to follow technology. We can use technology in different ways. There are choices we can make. And there are choices that have to be made in every company, between social partners, and in politics. Because I think for most people, even in the future, having a work that is more than a paycheck, that is healthy, that even gives some sense and is fun in the best way, is an aim that stays. And I think to try to pick up the challenge of digitalization, of changing world of work in an optimistic way, not trying to prevent any technology to be implemented, not trying to stop platforms before they even started, in an optimistic way, but in a way where we say we have choices and we can shape the future. I think then that is the best possibility to live in a world tomorrow where we have quality jobs for everybody, involving everybody, and having, at the same time, using the productivity benefits we could see from digitalization. Thank you very much.